Donald Trump has released what his administration describes as explosive new evidence about the 2020 U.S. election. The documents refer to Chinese access to American voter data, vulnerabilities in election systems, suspicious voter registration applications in Michigan, and hundreds of thousands of alleged non-citizens appearing on voter rolls. Trump says Americans were lied to about the security of the election. His supporters say the documents vindicate concerns that were dismissed for years. His critics say they prove nothing about who actually won in 2020. So, what do the documents really show? Do they prove widespread voter fraud? Do they prove that foreign actors changed votes? And most importantly, do they provide evidence that Donald Trump, not Joe Biden, was the legitimate winner of the 2020 election? Let's check the numbers. On July 16, 2026, President Trump delivered a nationally televised speech from the East Room of the White House. He warned of what he called shocking vulnerabilities in America's election infrastructure. He said foreign governments had acquired voter information, that intelligence had been withheld from him, and that Americans had been misled about the security of the 2020 election. One of his strongest lines was, "Americans were blatantly lied to about the security of our election infrastructure." He also promised that the country would never again witness what he called a stolen election. However, an important distinction is needed. Trump did not clearly demonstrate step by step that fraudulent ballots or altered voting machines changed enough votes to reverse the 2020 result. Instead, he connected evidence of vulnerabilities, suspicious activity, and foreign intelligence operations to his broader argument that the election system could not be trusted. The White House subsequently went further. Its official materials described the election system as broken and exposed, and argued that evidence of fraud had been buried. So the claim we are checking is not whether election vulnerabilities exist. They do. The claim is whether the newly released documents prove widespread fraud sufficient to invalidate or reverse the 2020 presidential election. The release contained several different categories of material. 1. Chinese acquisition of voter data. Trump said China had acquired approximately 220 million American voter files during the 2020 election cycle. That is an enormous number and a legitimate national security concern. But voter registration information, including names, addresses, voting history, and party registration, is often publicly available or commercially obtainable. The documents did not show that China used the information to manufacture ballots, alter voting machines, or change certified vote totals. The documents demonstrated access to data. They did not demonstrate altered votes. 2. Foreign interference and election system vulnerabilities. The documents described attempts by foreign powers to penetrate, influence, or exploit U.S. political and election systems. But foreign interference can mean several different things. It can mean propaganda, stealing voter information, hacking campaign emails, or spreading false stories online. Or, at the most serious level, it can mean changing registrations, ballots, or vote totals. Those are not equivalent. One assessment cited in the release reportedly concluded that manipulating election systems on a scale large enough to alter the national outcome would be difficult. The intelligence also described Russia as the foreign power with the clearest record of targeting or accessing election-related systems, while seeking to damage Joe Biden and benefit Trump. 3. Questionable Michigan registrations. The documents included an investigation into a voter registration operation in Muskegon, Michigan. Canvassers were accused of submitting registrations containing false names or forged signatures, and of receiving incentives based on the number of applications collected. That is serious and deserves investigation, but the questionable applications were intercepted by election officials, rather than automatically becoming ballots. The investigation was ultimately closed after authorities said they had not identified a criminal violation or national security threat that could be pursued. Suspicious registrations are evidence of a control system being tested. They are not automatically evidence that fraudulent votes were counted. 4. Alleged non-citizens on voter rolls. Trump cited a Department of Homeland Security review that reportedly identified approximately 278,000 possible non-citizens on voter rolls across 4 states, plus additional matches elsewhere. But being flagged by a database does not prove that a person is currently a non-citizen. Immigration databases may contain outdated records, someone could have naturalized, or names and dates of birth can be mismatched. More importantly, appearing on a voter roll is not the same as casting a ballot. The documents did not establish that 278,000 non-citizens voted in the 2020 presidential election. The White House and Trump's supporters characterized the release as a major vindication. Their argument was that officials and media organizations had treated all election security concerns as conspiracy theories. While the documents show that foreign adversaries possessed voter data, Election infrastructure had genuine vulnerabilities and suspicious registration activity had occurred. They argue that even without proof of changed votes, these dangers justified Trump's concerns and support stronger voter identification and citizenship verification laws. Democrats, election officials, and fact-checking organizations responded that the release blurred three separate issues: election vulnerabilities, foreign influence, and outcome-changing voter fraud. They argued that the documents contained no evidence that fraudulent votes exceeded Biden's margins in the decisive states. Even the conservative New York Post criticized the address as a missed opportunity, arguing that it focused on old vulnerabilities and voter information rather than producing decisive evidence about the 2020 outcome. That reaction is important because criticism did not come only from Trump's political opponents. This is not merely an argument about an election held 6 years ago. Belief that the 2020 result was illegitimate continues to influence public trust, voting laws, election administration, and attitudes toward future results. The Trump administration is using the disclosures to support stricter citizenship checks, voter identification requirements, and changes to federal election oversight. Supporters see those measures as basic safeguards. Opponents warn that unreliable database matching could wrongly remove eligible voters, particularly naturalized citizens, from voter rolls. The dispute also affects the 2026 midterm elections. When a political leader says the last election was stolen and the system remains broken, supporters may become less willing to accept a future loss. But dismissing every security concern can also damage confidence. The question is therefore not whether U.S. elections are perfect. No complex system is perfect. The question is therefore whether the available evidence demonstrates fraud on the scale needed to change the 2020 result. Let's run through 7 independent evidence checks. Evidence check 1. The certified national result. Official Federal Election Commission results show that Joe Biden received approximately 81.3 million votes, and Donald Trump received approximately 74.2 million. That is a national popular vote difference of roughly 7.1 million. The Electoral College result was 306 votes for Biden and 232 for Trump. The election would not have been reversed by changing the national popular vote alone. Trump would have needed to overturn the results in multiple decisive states. So the correct test is whether proven irregularities exceeded the certified margins in enough states to reach 270 electoral votes. Evidence check 2. Georgia's statewide hand count. Georgia conducted a manual audit of every presidential ballot cast in the state. The hand count confirmed that Biden won. Trump then requested another machine recount, which also upheld the result. A separate signature audit in Cobb County found no fraudulent absentee ballots and reported a 99.99% accuracy rate in signature verification procedures. Georgia was decided by 11,779 votes. The audits found administrative discrepancies, as large elections normally do, but not enough invalid votes to overturn that margin. Evidence check 3. Arizona investigations. Arizona's 2020 election was reviewed through audits, court proceedings, and investigations, including reviews supported by Republican state legislators. The Arizona Attorney General's office has said those investigations found no evidence of fraud sufficient to alter the result. Biden's Arizona margin was 10,457 votes. Investigators identified isolated issues and areas where procedures could improve, but not more than 10,000 fraudulent Biden votes. Evidence check 4. Trump's own Justice Department. In December 2020, Attorney General William Barr said the Justice Department had not found fraud on a scale that could have changed the outcome. Internal Justice Department communications later described the suspected misconduct under investigation as too small to affect the presidential result. That does not mean no fraud occurred. Individual election offenses happen. It means the department led by Trump's own appointees did not find fraud remotely approaching the scale required to reverse the election. Evidence check 5. Federal election security officials. Shortly after the election, the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, together with state and local election officials and voting technology representatives, said there was no evidence that any voting system deleted votes, lost votes, changed votes, or was compromised. They described the 2020 election as the most secure in American history. That phrase should not be interpreted as proof that every process was flawless. It means the agencies responsible for monitoring election infrastructure found no evidence of system manipulation that changed the result. Evidence check 6. Court challenges. Trump and his allies brought or supported more than 60 election-related court cases. Some were dismissed for procedural reasons. Others involved standing, timing, or legal arguments rather than full evidentiary trials. That context matters. It would be inaccurate to say every judge conducted a complete examination of every fraud allegation, but it is equally inaccurate to say courts confirmed widespread fraud. The litigation did not produce a judicial finding that fraudulent ballots changed enough state results to make Trump the winner. Judges appointed by both Republican and Democratic presidents rejected efforts to invalidate the certified outcome. Evidence Check 7. The scale problem. This is perhaps the most important statistical point. Finding 100 suspicious registrations does not prove 100 fraudulent votes. Finding 10,000 outdated voter records does not prove 10,000 illegal ballots. Finding that a foreign government obtained voter information does not prove that it changed a single vote. To overturn the election, evidence would have to show enough net fraudulent votes, not merely errors, registrations, or vulnerabilities, to reverse multiple state margins. Biden won Arizona by 10,457 votes, Georgia by 11,779, and Wisconsin by 20,682. Even reversing all three would not necessarily have been enough by themselves, depending on the combination of states. The newly released documents do not provide a verified ballot-by-ballot total approaching those thresholds. The documents are not meaningless. They support several legitimate conclusions. Foreign governments seek American voter and political data. Election databases and voting infrastructure face real cyber risks. Voter registration drives can produce fraudulent or defective applications. Government agencies may disagree internally about foreign interference. Voter rolls contain outdated, duplicate, or inaccurate information that should be corrected carefully. And election officials should continuously improve audits, paper records, cybersecurity, and transparency. Those are genuine findings. But none of them proves that widespread fraudulent voting occurred in 2020, and none proves that Donald Trump received more valid electoral votes than Joe Biden. This is the difference between proving vulnerability and proving exploitation. A bank may have security weaknesses. That does not prove money was stolen. And evidence that someone attempted to enter the bank does not prove they emptied the vault. Our final StatsCheck verdict is misleading. The documents contain authentic and important information about foreign intelligence activity, voter data exposure, possible non-citizens on voter rolls, suspicious registration applications, and weaknesses in election infrastructure. So it would be wrong to say they contain nothing of concern. But the headline claim that the documents prove widespread voter fraud in the 2020 election goes beyond the evidence. They do not show that China changed vote totals. They do not show that 278,000 non-citizens voted. They do not show that Michigan's suspicious registrations became counted ballots, and they do not identify enough fraudulent votes to reverse the certified results in the necessary states. The documents strengthen the argument for better election security. They do not establish that the 2020 presidential result was fraudulent or that Donald Trump was the true winner. That is the difference between evidence of risk and evidence of a stolen election.